First off, want to welcome everyone to our end of session briefing here for the Minnesota Farm Bureau. For those who maybe haven't met me yet, my name is Bennett. I'm the Director of Public Policy here at the Farm Bureau. And my colleague, Loren Dauer, is with me. Loren's going to introduce himself here in a second. Wanted before we got going here to go over a few housekeeping rules that you'll see here on the screen that we are sharing. Few things that would be helpful for us if you are able and willing. We would love it if you all would include your names on your profiles, like many, if not all of you are doing. And we would also appreciate if you could include your county possibly, and if not, that's okay. But if you're able to do that, that's helpful to us. Few quick reminders. Please, while Loren and I are presenting, remain muted. I know this time of year, many of us might be in tractors or doing some chores around the house, so there might be some background noise. So would certainly appreciate folks muting. In terms of questions and the ability to interact with Loren and I, we are going to take questions at the end of our presentation. So you are welcome to enter any questions you may have into our chat feature, where you can send those to us in writing, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. We're also going to leave time at the end of the presentation for folks to use the raise hand feature and holler at us and ask their question that way. If you are having any trouble with your Wi-Fi connection, oftentimes the first thing we suggest doing is to turn your video off if it's on. That oftentimes will help. We won't be able to see you, but that's okay. I think it will help with the connection. And then also, if you're still struggling, remembering to not have other devices actively streaming or using a bunch of internet while you're listening to us here on Zoom is also helpful. I do see, Larry, do you have a question?
Larry Larson?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, I'm trying to figure out how to sign in here. Let's click three buttons. Click on three buttons at the top right. I can't figure it out.
Oh, well, I would say, Larry, we can see you or hear you. I mean, I'll just rename you real quick. How's that?
Okay, I didn't know I was asking a question even. I'm just playing with this thing.
That's all right. If I misspelled your last name, I apologize. So as I mentioned earlier, want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We have quite a few participants with us this evening. All of that said, I'm going to get us going. And if folks are joining a little late, they won't miss too much here. So gonna advance the slide here and allow Loren Dauer to introduce himself. But because I'm long-winded, before he does, I have to say, Loren joined our team in February, actually 2 weeks before state session started. He's a dairy kid who grew up in New Ulm, Minnesota. Has been involved in Minnesota agriculture his entire life. And, you know, we were so thankful and blessed to have him on our team. And I tell you what, folks, you're getting a really awesome opportunity here to spend some time with him, to hear about all the work he did at the State House, and couldn't encourage you more when you get the chance to interact with Loren, but also say a thank you. He did some really awesome work this year, and luckily for me, he's much smarter than me. So he's been a wonderful addition to our team. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Loren, and advance the slide for you here, if I can.
Yeah, absolutely, Pierce. One thing is, did you draw some red lines on the screen there?
I didn't, no, but there are some red lines there. So
okay, perfect. Well, we don't have to worry about the cosmetics. We'll just we'll keep going through with it. Yeah, as Pierce said, my name is Loren Dauer. Yeah, been on the team for about 4 months now. Just my entire experience has solely been up at the Capitol with the legislative session. Most of my days have been up there interacting with different legislators and lobbyists, advocating on behalf of Farm Bureau and its positions overall. And so it was it was kind of a hit the ground running moment for me. As Pierce said, I started a week before, but with my past experiences, I think I was set in a pretty good position to handle the tasks ahead of us. So just Pierce, if you want to go to the next slide, just wanted to reiterate kind of what the plan was for this evening. Mainly it's going to be strictly the legislative session. I know last year we might have done a little bit of a federal update, but we want to make sure we're cognizant of your time. If we do need more time for a follow-up on federal update, we can do that. But happy to see everyone on here. There's plenty of familiar names of people that I've interacted with in my short time here. I hope everyone's doing okay and no one missed the meeting due to power outages. I know my mom said she just lost power outside of New Ulm, but hopefully everyone's doing okay and not having too much damage. But yeah, so like I said, we're going to do an overview of the session for the past 4 months. We're going to run through the different policies that we supported as an organization, as well as policies that we had to oppose. And then after that, I'll probably mention some policies that did get included in the Ag Omnibus bill that just happened that were included, but I felt that they should be mentioned. And then lastly, we'll do some honorable mentions for some bills that in my opinion, I thought were a little bit ridiculous. Nothing too bad, but I just thought they were funny, and I just had to mention them. And then at the very end of that, we'll be taking questions. So if you're ready to go, we'll get right into it for the next slide here, Pierce. So this session this year was a non-budget year in the second year of the biennium. Typically what that means is all the budgets were determined last year. As you know, there was a $17 billion surplus that was spent last year around that $70 billion budget. So this year they were only looking at spending upwards of $500 million in supplemental budgets across all areas and departments in government. That being said, we had very small budget targets for the agriculture industry. Just so that everyone's aware, when we get into the grant dollars, they will seem a little bit small for just generally speaking, but in a non-budget year, that's kind of what we're trying to assist with, different programs that are needed dollars here and there. But generally speaking, I just wanted to say overall, this was a very effective session. Compared to last year, especially, we had the opportunity to express the views of our members. We had more time to meet with legislators. More of them accepted our meetings. They even interacted with us more in the hallways. I know during committee and floor debates, our organization, Farm Bureau, was mentioned several times. And in this last couple of weeks of negotiations, I know legislators had to rely on us for input and be a source of information for some of these negotiations. And I just wanted to say, our members were heard. I wanted to thank all of you that participated this session, whether that was at the Day on the Hill. We had over 150 participants there. It was just a great opportunity to have our members interact with legislators. We also had a follow-up day with just the Farm Bureau board up at the Hill. We had an opportunity to speak with the governor, the commissioner of ag, as well as some key leadership members, as well as chairs and ranking members of the agriculture committee. So that was very helpful. That was 2 weeks before session ended, and it came at a very critical point that helped us out. And then just a couple of shout outs, Dan Glessing, Jeff Pagel, as well as Pierce and I, we had some testimonies in some of these committees that were well heard. Just wanted to say we were present, we were available, I was there at least every day watching, monitoring the legislative session. And if there was an opportunity to testify on a bill we supported, or even more, if there was something that was way more controversial, I was there. I was upfront and present and communicating our position to legislators. So that's just kind of a quick general overview. I know over the last couple of days, especially with session that ended at midnight, the business side of it yesterday, as well as midnight this past Sunday, there is a lot of talk in the news that that session ended in a chaos, that it was chaotic, that bills were rushed. Now, I'll have to say that there was some of that went on. There was some parliamentary procedure motions that kind of ended debate a little early. That did happen, but overall, despite all of that happening, we did come out pretty successful. Unfortunately, there was a cash bonding bill that didn't make that crossed the finish line there. There was some dollars in there for First District that would have been helpful in their pre-treatment wastewater plant. That didn't happen, but otherwise, besides that, it was a very successful session, in my opinion. And we will continue to build on the relationships that we've had, continue to have these meetings throughout the summer, and look forward to collaborating with these legislators and with the departments in the future. So I think we've set ourselves up in a very good position. And overall, like I said, our legislative priorities were mostly met. And so now I can take the opportunity to go into that here on this next slide, Pierce. So just for everyone's awareness, policies that have an asterisk at the front and back of it failed during session. And then any policies that are bolded were policies that we spent most of our time on. So I'd be happy to kind of go into some of these areas specifically in the realm of the policy of support. We were looking at several reauthorization of different councils. The first one there, AFREC, is the Ag Fertilizer Research Education Council. That one was looking at reauthorization. There were several, essentially there's a fertilizer tax fee tonnage that gets collected every year. It is collected and spent on research, essentially. It's about $1 million a year. And the council is made up of different board members from all the different agricultural groups, the commodities, livestock, us, and other groups, crop retailers. And at this point, we did see that cross the finish line. We had to have a couple of negotiations and compromise on that. So we went to a 5-year reauthorization for that. And there was a couple of board member additions to that. But besides that, we're very happy with that outcome. The governor wanted it. The Senate's position wanted it. The House, unfortunately, wanted to take those dollars and spend it on a private well clean drinking water program that essentially should be spent through state dollars and not by taxing the farmers for that. So we're very happy with that. 2 other smaller councils. We have the Food Safety and Defense Task Force. Our foundation chair, Ruth Merrick, serves on that. Essentially, this is an opportunity to take a look at the greater food supply chain to make sure that it's safe. They get recommendations from the Department of Health as well as the Department of Ag, just to make sure that we have a sustainable, good health food essentially coming through the pipeline. And then we have the Organic Advisory Task Force. Our Vice President, Carolyn Olson, serves on that, just looking at how to expand on organic agriculture throughout the state and vegetables as well. Next, we got one area was essentially grants that were focused on. This was part of a $4.5 million target. Essentially, if we go down the list with Agri, there is funding agreed for in the next biennium. So those dollars won't be appropriated for this year, but they will start next year. Essentially, that will help us generate dollars to go to the Agri fund. Agri, as some of you may or may not know, is an umbrella program established by the legislature back in 2009 just to promote the advancement of the state's agricultural role in renewable energy industries. So there's some biofuel grants in there. There's dollars for farm to school programs, as well as beginner farmer programs. And I believe I mentioned biofuel infrastructure as well. But those are going to be included for the next biennium. Next on the list, we have manure management grants by the Board of Water and Soil Resources. Essentially, those dollars will go to farmers that need help with manure storage and best management practices for manure. Next on the list, we had some career and technical education dollars, about almost $225,000 there. That primarily went to different schools to build essentially classrooms that would educate kids that want to learn about being a butcher or learning how to cut meat. Just some hands-on education that will be very beneficial for the next generation of workers. So next we have farm school initiatives, $100,000 there in grants. That'll be helpful just to expand one, more dollars to it, but also two, it'll help. My notes are here. It'll also include childcare facilities that were previously excluded. So we'll have schools, but now we'll also have childcare facilities. Next is livestock protection grants. In the news, we've been hearing a lot about the high path avian influenza outbreak that's kind of spreading right now. Some of these dollars would go to kind of mitigating flocks of birds around different turkey and poultry operations. Very, very excited to see what that looks like. Next on the list is Dairy with an Eye program. That is kind of in response to a federal program. It is not part of the budget target because this was included in previous biennium. It was not used this past year. It's kind of based off of the Farm Bill. Pierce, did you have any thoughts on Dairy with an Eye and how that ties in with the Farm Bill?
Sure. Well, Lauren, I think what's important about Dairy with an Eye is it is designed to help increase participation in our dairy margin coverage program, which is a federal program. We're currently working on that in the Farm Bill. And so Dairy with an Eye helps producers meet that initial premium for sign-up. And that helps encourage producers to utilize the DMC, which gives them more coverage and protection in the event they need so. And I think, as all of us know, in dairy country, things have been tough. And so Dairy with an Eye is a fantastic example of when the state and federal folks get together, you can really do some good. And we're very excited that money remained and that it wasn't messed with in any way this year. And I think that's a net positive for us.
Perfect. Next on the list, we have the soil health equipment grants, almost $500,000 there. That kind of goes towards farmers that want to utilize different types of equipment to have best management practices, including cover crops, different types of tilling, whether that's no-till or strip-till, just dollars to assist farmers in transitioning to different practices that assist with nitrate mitigation or leaching. And then lastly, AUR funding, just some market expansion dollars there. And then overall, some general policy things. There was just some cooperative finance reporting. Right now, co-ops have to require financial reporting, usually at their annual meetings. But this would just include more opportunity for co-ops, or it would require co-ops to essentially do it at the end of their fiscal year. And then there's also going to be some recommendations from the Department of Agriculture and what that should look like as well. Next on the list, one of the bills that failed, there was a egg water quality certification program tax credit. So any person that does have that certification would have been paid, I believe it was either 5 or 15, I can't remember right now, dollars per acre. And so just an opportunity to give back to the farmers that already use best management practices, that are taking care of the land. And we wanted to make sure that they're rewarded for that type of behavior. Next, there's a bill that was offered to essentially label cell cultured meat. In our policy, we are pretty supportive of that. We just want to make sure that non-traditional meat sources, including cell cultured products, are not called meat. I see some similarities with this, kind of in the dairy realm when we start to think about oat milk or other forms of milk, like they're essentially nut juice, I would say. Like Pierce said, I grew up on a dairy farm, so I'll call it what I will. But we just wanted to make sure that labeling for meat products was that there's more transparency to the consumer. Unfortunately, that didn't make it past the conference committee at the very end here. And then lastly, wanted to say we did get an exemption for the earned sick and safe time for farmers that had 5 or less employees. This was introduced last year, or the program was introduced last year with no exemptions. And we did get it onto the Senate bill, thanks to Senator Dornick, as well as Senator Kupek. But unfortunately, during the conference negotiations between the House and Senate, they stripped that out of there. And so that is something that we're going to continue to work on. There's also going to be that paid family leave bill that was passed last year. That's going to be taking effect next year. And so we'll continue to try and find exemptions for that. It's just we don't want to be having individuals and farmers especially be paying into a system in which we're already working with tight margins. So anyway, that's about it on the policy support. Pierce, if we're ready for the next one, we can go that route. So next on the policy of opposition, like I said, I wish we had more time to focus on beyond the offensive. We were very much on the defense this year, and I will be going through some of these provisions, but I found myself sitting more often than not in the environment committee, even though I work for a general ag lobby group, and so grassroots advocacy group. And it's just very interesting to see that I have to sit in environment policy and make sure that some certain environmental regulations aren't being passed. So I just wanted to mention that. But first off, in the agriculture policy, there was some penalties as well as a prohibition on domestic hog release. Now, you might ask me, why are we having a prohibition on that? Some people believe that it's people do this intentionally and it can cause harm to their neighbors. And essentially any one of our producers I know generally don't want to do that. And so it was something that we monitored, but it was one of the things I went through there. But unfortunately, if there's intentional folks releasing their domestic hogs, I believe that there is a fine of up to $1,000 as well as a possible misdemeanor. But I know how expensive hogs can be, and I think no one here is intentionally trying to do that. So next on the list, the fertilizer tax increase. So I mentioned at the very beginning, one of our policy priorities was the AFREC Council, the Fertilizer Research Council. That is where they wanted to increase that fee. They wanted to increase it from the 40 cents per ton upwards of 80 to over $1 a ton, essentially. This was also where they wanted to use those dollars, take it away from research and put it towards that state program that would have been strictly on the private well drinking water program that would have addressed the lack of clean water in the Southeast. But we understand that AFREC's work is very helpful with sustainable agriculture, as well as mitigating our nitrate problems, as well as incorporating best management practices. And we felt because the farmers are the ones ultimately paying for this tax, we should be the ones determining where those dollars go. That was one of the big bills that we got killed, essentially. That was all thanks to Representative Brand out of Nicollet County. He essentially stood up to the chair and said, no new taxes in a non-budget year, essentially. So but we're very helpful. We're very thankful for that. Next on the list, we have some fertilizer definitions. These definitions essentially were systemic fertilizer or urea or different types of fertilizers. And the reason we were opposed to this, even though some of these definitions might seem harmless at first, or we like to call them orphan definitions, because they're not referenced in any other statute. So why are we putting these in here? If it's supposed to be harmless and there's no reference to them in statutes, or there's no policy referencing them, why are they being included? And our understanding is that these could be used possibly against us in the future. And so that is why we are opposing it, drawing a line in the sand early on so we don't have to deal with it in upcoming sessions. Next, we got the bird hatching ban. Not sure how or why this got introduced, but there was some understanding or thoughts that our FFA and 4-H programs were somewhat harming poultry chicks, and that was not taken well. Obviously, our hatching programs in schools are very beneficial to educating our young students about agriculture and getting them involved in the industry. And luckily, that was not included in negotiations. That was taken out right away. Quite big uproar for that one, essentially, probably more than any of the others. So, but I'll leave it at that. Next on the list, we have the environment policies. Like I said, I had to sit in environment committee quite a bit just to monitor what was coming through. And these were some of the bigger issues for us. I bolded 3 of them here. And unfortunately, as you can see, that first one there with the check mark, that one did pass, which is the public waters inventory expansion. Just for background, the DNR created a public waters inventory map that people could go onto their website to understand and know specifically where their public waters exist in the state of Minnesota. Now, there are some requirements with that, including buffer strips and some reporting requirements if you do any drainage. But because of that, there was certainty to our landowners and to our farmers of where these public waters existed. What this policy does is a public water can exist not based off of solely whether or not it is included on this map. So essentially, it just opens up to lack of clarity of what a public water is. There will be some dollars to the DNR to update these maps. And because of this new language on there, there's just a lack of certainty. And so it's something that we were, didn't want to have go through. We tried to definitely stop that, but in a last minute negotiation, it did get included, unfortunately. I would say, luckily for us, this language doesn't take effect until 2027. So that gives us a couple of sessions to write that language out. And I can tell you that's going to be one of our biggest priorities for sessions to come. Kind of related to the public waters is the next one, buffer strip penalty increases. That went from $500 penalty from your soil water conservation district to $10,000. Now, that is a ridiculous growth in a penalty for people that are non-compliant with buffer strip law. But I can say on the DNR's website or Bowser's website, we're already at 98, 99% compliance. There is some provisions in this bill that allows for you to mitigate these concerns or become compliant I think the impression is they're not going to slap $10,000 on your on if you're not following buffer strip law. And you can work with your SWCD to make sure that you do become compliant. And hopefully this doesn't become a situation where people are being slapped with giant fines. And if you are, and if you do hear about this, please let us know. That would be very helpful just to see what kind of impact this has on farmers. Next on the list of things that failed would be the drain tile disclosure agreement. Last year, as some of you might remember, there was conversations around a public drainage portal that would essentially allow a public website for anyone to know where any drainage project was happening throughout the state. This was a way, kind of clever way, to only have drain tile disclosed at the point of sale, and you would have to report this. We were very concerned with this language, not because farmers already practice disclosing if they have drain tiles. It's more profitable for a person who's trying to sell their land, but also there were some liability that was included at this. For up to 6 years, the seller, after the real estate purchase, could be liable for any drain tile damage or repair that was not disclosed. And so we felt this was unnecessary. As a farm kid, I know there's really old tile that exists in the soil, and so it's really hard to monitor where all that is. But farmers mostly culturally practice disclosing that already, and we didn't see the need to put that in statute. Next, we have the environmental impact statement for 10,000 animal unit feedlots. This one was brought up pretty much as a discussion piece. We wanted to essentially talk about why we why were smaller dairies essentially going away in our state. And so the conversation around this was a little misleading. Essentially, this was specifically about regulatory requirements for larger feedlots. And so if we wanted to have a discussion about small dairy farms, we could do that. But why are we placing regulations on large feedlots? Typically, most feedlots over 1,000 animal units have to fill out an environmental assessment worksheet. This provides most, if not all, of the necessary information around a feedlot's environmental impact. And so these EISs are typically meant for large manufacturing projects or mining projects up north. So we didn't see the need to do this. The commissioner at the Pollution Control Agency can already request an EIS, a voluntary EIS, at any time. So we didn't want to see this put into statute for future possibilities of being reduced. There were members on the Environment Committee that even suggested that 10,000 was too high and that they should start lowering that number. Luckily enough, it was removed in the end here, and we're happy to see it gone. But next, there was a corn ban on state land. The DNR, in agreement with private property owners and farmers, essentially allow for them to grow commercial product, corn, soybean, on state land that is owned by the state. And what they wanted to do was ban that. These agreements were meant to feed wildlife populations, especially deer. And so we just saw this as an unnecessary requirement. It was pulled out. There was some agreed to language that would require agriculture land to follow DNR standards around best management practices as well as fertilizer use. To my understanding, most of these farmers already do that. And so it was some feel-good language that won't have much impact on farmers. And then lastly, in the environment policy area, there are some manure management restrictions. Specifically, this would require manure management plans for any farm that was over 500 animal units. That's about 400 cows. So, or maybe a little bit less than that, if my math is correct. Essentially, it would also create a public database that showed the location of each of these sites, and as well as their size. There were also violations included with this. If you violated, or essentially if you didn't follow the manure plan, that could result in a $5,000 fine. This would also create minimum setbacks for feedlots within certain distances of sinkholes, municipal wells, hospitals, streams, and wetlands. Luckily enough, I included this on here. This was one of the bills that were dropped, but were not heard. This was something that we didn't have to deal with, and I didn't have to spend much time on it. And we're just very thankful that it didn't go anywhere, but also just want to be cognizant of the fact that legislators are thinking about these things. And that's why it's so important for us to continue to educate them on these different policies. Next, we have the Clean Transportation Standard here. This was a bill that was considered very early on. To my understanding, this was meant to be a conversation around what we could do in regards to clean fuel in our transportation industry. This originated kind of out of the West Coast in California, where they wanted to essentially go to zero liquid fuels by 2040 or 2050. I forget the exact year, but we wanted to make sure that we were part of this conversation. I did put it as a piece of opposition just because if it was to go too environmental, too radical, no conversations around biofuels in a state where we're number 3 in soybean and corn production, ethanol, biodiesel is produced. There's a lot produced in this state. And so if we weren't going to be allowed to have a conversation around biofuels, including that in this clean transportation standard, then we were going to be opposed to it. But essentially, as long as biofuels was included, whatever's good for biofuels is good for farmers. So, but yeah, that was just one piece that we had a conversation on early on in session. It was heard in committee, but it never moved forward in the committee process or even was debated on the floor. So something to monitor for future years. And lastly, another piece of legislation that we saw going around was the right to repair bill. As some of you know, American Farm Bureau has gone to a lot of the the tractor and implement manufacturers in our country, John Deere, Kubota, Case IH, some of those, New Holland, some of those companies, and got these memorandums of understandings, or in legal terms, agreements with these organizations to make sure that they are doing everything in their power to provide parts and necessary equipment to our farmers, that they are not being restricted in any way. Unfortunately, there was some legislation going around that would have put some pretty strong, essentially would have put this in statutes. And so having this in statute is really hard to adjust. As we know, we only meet in session for 6 months out of the year. Working with governments, it's really hard to change policy once it becomes law. These MOUs that American Farm Bureau have established with these implement dealers and manufacturers are routinely reviewed every 6 months. And so that gives us the opportunity to listen from our farmers and our producers to say, hey, what do you need? What do you have any issues? We can convey that through our national organization and work with these companies. So looking towards the future, we would like to have more conversations around lack of technicians, or how do we get more parts circulated through the supply chain. So that's kind of where we drove this type of conversation. But just putting it in statutes would have been quite restrictive. So in our position, but that's pretty much it for the policy area of opposition. Next on our list, I just wanted to do a quick honorable mentions. These are some of the bills that I thought were kind of funny. I included the first one in one of the areas of support. This was the livestock protection grant. It originally started as a HPAI prevention grant. As the chair of the Senate Agriculture Committee likes to quote this bill as turkey lasers. I even mentioned it in my testimony, and we had some good humor from that, good laughs throughout the committee process, and just one of those bills you just have to look at and just laugh. So, and then the next two, some of the things that I just can't believe were introduced was the bird hatching ban. It's kind of ridiculous to think that some of our legislators don't understand what happens in our schools, our education, our care of animals. And so that one luckily failed on its own. Didn't really have any legs to it, but just wanted to mention that one. And then lastly, something I didn't mention that was in the environment bill on the Senate side. It didn't happen, it failed, but there were some grants, $500,000 for these non-lethal beaver management grants. So these dollars would have went to, I believe, the DNR to essentially hire someone to relocate beavers without harming them. I just had to laugh at this one because, you know, $500,000 is a lot of dollars. And if you go back to some of the policy areas that we were supporting, we could barely get $100,000. And so it's the balance of distribution of dollars this session is just somewhat laughable, but figured I'd mention that. Yeah, just wanted to say it was a really good session, that we worked really hard. We had very very structured and important meetings that were critical for our members.